Hey, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to do something a little different. I've had some people in my support group ask for a few recipes, so today we're going to do one called Dixie ham stew. I don't really have a written recipe because I didn't grow up with a mom that went by written recipes. We just kind of wing it and look at it and say, yep, that looks right. So you're going to start out with a little bit of olive oil in the bottom of your pan. Let that get hot. I'll put a better description of the ingredients down below. You're going to add 1 tablespoon of minced garlic. Oh, that smells good already. Maybe a little more than a tablespoon. Some chopped onion. I think this is about 1/4 cup of chopped onion. To that, you're going to add some kind of Creole seasoning. This is my favorite kind, so this is what I'm going to put in there. Do that to your taste. I tend to put a good bit of it in there because we like things a little bit spicy. Add in a little bit of black pepper. Salt to taste. I don't put in a whole lot of salt because it just really doesn't need it with everything else that you're putting in. You're going to give all that a stir. That smells so good. You're going to let that kind of hang out in the olive oil until your onions start getting a little translucent and the smell gets really mingled and strong. You can add more or less garlic, whatever's good for you. Now, when I was growing up and my mom made this, she just kind of used whatever she had left over in the refrigerator to make it. I've seen recipes online where they use hominy or turkey and different kind of greens, but this is just the way I grew up doing it. Now, normally we would be using leftover ham, but I didn't have any leftover ham this Thanksgiving, so I bought this cubed ham just for the purposes of making this video, because normally I would use leftover ham. It just tastes better to me. That smells so good. Now you're going to put in your cubed ham. You can use whatever kind of meat you choose to. Ham, turkey, chicken, whatever you like. We just always grew up using ham in ours because that's usually what we had mostly left over. You're going to need to let your pan come back up to temperature once you put that ham in there because that was kind of cold. Go. Let it get kind of simmery in there again and all welded together. The next thing you're going to add in there is your greens. You can use whatever kind of greens you like. My mom usually tended to use leftover. These are fresh collards. You can use collards, turnips, spinach, whatever kind of green you'd like. You just need some kind of leafy green in there with it. Now this is going to look like a lot when you put it in the pot, but they tend to cook down really well, so it's not going to be that much once it gets cooked down. And if you use any kind of fresh greens, make sure that you really wash them extremely well because you don't want to get a mouthful of grit in your stew. My granny's rule was always wash them 5 times, rinse and wash 5 times to make sure you don't get a mouthful of sand. And that will all start to get hot. Next, we're going to add in some stewed tomatoes. You can use any kind you like. I prefer fire roasted stewed tomatoes. They just taste better to me. Just keep stirring because you don't want that garlic and onion to sit on the bottom of the pan. You want it all mixed in with what you're putting in. Next, you're going to add in some chicken broth. I know that doesn't look like a lot of liquid right now, but you'll add more to it later. Next, we're going to use some black-eyed peas. These are frozen. You can use frozen, canned, dried, as long as you've rinsed and drained them. This is my favorite part of a stew, so we tend to have more black-eyed peas in there than we do just about anything. Now this that I'm using is a 6-quart Dutch oven. When I make a stew like this or any kind of soup, I make a big batch of it so that I can freeze some for days when I don't feel well enough to cook. Then you're going to add some cut okra. It can be fresh or frozen, whatever you like. This is frozen because that's just what I have on hand today. Keep stirring it all together. Now, a lot of the recipes that you see for this, if you find an actual recipe for it, they'll call for hominy. I don't like that. We don't use that. I use corn. But if you like hominy, go right ahead and put that in there. This is 1 small bag of frozen whole kernel corn. But again, you can use whatever kind you like. And just make sure it's whole kernel and not cream corn, because that won't go well. Now, it doesn't look right now like there's enough liquid in there, but all these vegetables that I put in there, with the exception of the collards, are frozen, so they're going to add their own water to this mixture, and you don't want it to be too watery. So we've got all of our ingredients in here now. We are going to put the lid on it, turn it down to medium-low, and let it simmer for about 30 minutes, and then we're going to come back and check it and see how much liquid's in it. So we'll be back. Okay, this has been going for about 30 minutes now. You can see how much liquid gets in it as it starts to cook down, and those stewed tomatoes really start to turn it red. I did have to go back and add about a half a cup of water to it, but I have mostly frozen vegetables in here. So if you're using dried peas or canned vegetables, you may need to add a little bit more water, but because these were all frozen vegetables, they pretty much made their own liquid. Over here in this pot, I have some rice cooking because I like to serve this over rice with some cornbread when it's done. And that is Dixie ham stew. See you next time.